the start of the war in Gaza. Despite the central role U.S. negotiators continue to play, only 4 have been American so far, including the one tonight, the 49-year-old Liat Benin. She is a dual Israeli-American citizen. Her husband, as we mentioned earlier, was kidnapped as well by Hamas. He's still stuck in Gaza as far as we know. This comes as new word tonight that even more resources are now heading over to the Middle East. This time, one of the government's most seasoned hostage negotiators, the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, Roger Carstens, on his way. He joins the CIA Director William Burns. Later this week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken as well, both working to free Americans in the area. But since the truce was put in place, that work, again, has freed just one other tiny American hostage, the 4-year-old girl Abigail Edan, who watched her parents die before she was kidnapped by people who hate her family. What a scene that was. And now we have the one more American hostage tonight. I'm joined by Israeli Special Ops veteran Aaron Cohen tonight. Aaron's also a founder of a company that's called Cherries, which specializes in counterterrorism training for law enforcement. So, you know, Aaron, we could back into this by starting, I suppose, with the good news. We didn't know if there would be. We've said it every night. Well, there'll be an American on the list. Finally, tonight, there is one. Is that something to build on, or how do you view that?
Well, Connell, here's where I'm at with all this. Obviously, getting the hostages back, which I've said multiple times over the last 50-plus days, has always been Israel's first priority. We're in the business of rescuing our hostages. Every single one of them matters. Israel will go to war to go get its hostages. That's priority number one. But I got to tell you, right now, at this trickle rate that Hamas is releasing them is where I'm concerned. And I'm going to explain why. And I'm going to come at this from a counterterror and special operations perspective. I've been in this business 20-plus years. Right now, we're looking at about 30% or just under 30% of hostages which are being released. These hostages have been separated from their families, which means they're coming out. Some of them don't have family members that were killed in that October 7th massacre. Some of those that are coming out have been separated from live parents who are still being held captive. My concern right now, and the conversations that people are having in Israel right now, let me just say this. Bibi's got a good handle on this right now. He understands this conflict very well. He comes from our general staff, special operations unit. He's one of Israel's finest. But he's in a very tough situation right now. The conversations that are being had is, how come that number's not 70 or 80%, Connell? And let me tell you why I believe it's not at 70 or 80%. I believe that the president has ended up getting himself into a situation where he has been forced to do whatever it takes to get any hostages released. And in the counterterror business, conceding to that psychological warfare, that fear. We don't live on hope, which is what you just said in your last little piece there. Right. Optimism is not something that we placate to. And so what that means is Israel needs to start looking at options. Let me ask you this. If we were to crank up operations tomorrow, what would that do to that pressure on Hamas? Hamas was begging for this ceasefire. Israel agreed on one condition: start releasing our people. But if operations continued in 10 minutes from now, what would happen to those numbers? Now, we're talking about real lives here that we're trying to save.
Right.
And again, we just had a report now of potential kids who may have been killed or may have been dead.
On that, if you can. So,
here's what I think is going to. Here's what I think is going to happen. What I think is going to happen is if Israel went back to the operational status right now, that would increase the pressure on Hamas, which is the reason why they were begging for this ceasefire, because of that sir lachatz, like we say in Hebrew, that brilliant pressure cooker campaign that Israel held on Hamas for over a month. They begged for that ceasefire. Number two, why is the country that is harboring Hamas leadership, Ismail Haniyeh and Khalid Mashal, why are they at the front and center of these negotiations right now? Is that really in good faith? Number three, and this is where I come out, this is my final piece.
Right.
Maybe it's time for Israel to start looking at capital punishment for 2 very high-level terrorists we've been keeping in our prisons in Israel. Because although Hamas is not afraid to die, let me make it really clear on that little green bandana that was made famous on October 7th at that kibbutz, those kibbutz massacres, which is Hatalmut in Arabic, tell the death. While they may not be afraid to die, I can assure you those fat cat leaders in our prisons and sitting in Qatar are more than afraid to die because they're nothing more than gangsters. So it might be time to start reframing the leverage, which I feel has been lost.